We are talking the science fiction horror movie Broken Darkness, directed and written by Christopher Lee dos Santos. Now, this is a survival horror movie in the wastelands of a post-apocalyptic world. Now, the actual cause of the apocalypse is somewhat different from a lot of other movies. We actually see at the beginning of the movie, we have this kind of massive meteor shower that comes down and essentially devastates what we assume can only be the whole planet. And a few kind of savvy survivors ultimately head towards these kind of mines and kind of get underground to try and get the away from this kind of like this vicious meteor shower. Now it focuses on one particular guy and his son that kind of goes into these mines, and in the kerfuffle to get in there, his son is killed. Then we cut to kind of 8 years later, and there now has been a kind of society that has arisen from these kind of these underground mines sort of across this kind of area, and everyone is playing their part. There's a kind of like the hierarchy that seems to be somewhat dictator-like, if that makes sense. And we focus on our sort of primary character, who's kind of like a maintenance guy, and he, a friend of his, and this young girl ultimately end up trying to go to this other camp some ways away to try and fix something. And then they discover there may be some type of dark creatures that are living in these tunnels. Now these creatures are basically mutants that have come from above, that have been somehow changed through bacteria that came down in the meteor shower kind of 8 years previously, and have turned into kind of like zombie-like kind of creatures, a bit like rage-infected ones from 28 Days Later. So this kind of small group of protagonists have to try and fend these things off and get up to the surface to find out even more dangers in the form of ravaging gangs and that decide they like to chow down on human flesh. So what happens? You have to watch the movie to find out. This movie obviously juggling a lot of balls here. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in this movie, and has a quite kind of nihilistic and dark tone throughout the film. So it feels like a depressing environment, as it should, as you'd probably expect in a kind of an end of the world scenario. But this movie is not played for laughs. It's pretty much a straight film. And our kind of lead character, you always have the feeling he has this weight on him, because obviously he lost his son at the beginning of the movie, and he's now having to look after this kind of like this of young sort of teenage girl and stuff, but he doesn't really want to, and ultimately he's kind of forced to kind of sort of step up to the plate. But you never really feel like he's got any joy in his life. And there's all these different things. We have these mutants that actually look pretty good and pretty savage actually, but you don't know too much about them, which I thought was a good thing. There's a little bit of exposition maybe, but I thought that was pretty good, really, sort of having the mystery with them. I feel the movie loses a little bit of steam in our kind of second half in regards to these cannibals. To me, they're a little bit on the weaker side. The movie just slows down a little bit. I think maybe it's got a little bit too much to do here. But nonetheless, I actually quite like this film. I actually thought it doesn't really follow a 3-act structure, so to speak. I actually thought the journey of these guys was unexpected. You didn't really know where it was going to end up, and I kind of appreciated that. It was, and I kind of quite like the chemistry between our kind of lead characters, because you do have a kind of a stoic, reluctant hero who really doesn't seem that heroic, but ultimately is forced to be. And this young girl who is kind of like ultimately becomes a bit of a burden, but her heart's in the kind of the right place. And I kind of like that chemistry. It's obviously a low budget movie, but I like the world building here. I think they do a good job of kind of selling you on this kind of world and kind of make it quite exciting. And I appreciate the fact that there's different facets, different kind of challenges to overcome within this movie. I don't think it completely works, as I say. I think maybe the last sort of quarter or third of this movie is a little on the weakest side, and the kind of when we get to our cannibals, they just seem a little OTT and a little out of a more of a straight to DVD, straight to video, I should say, kind of 80s post-apocalyptic flick. Whilst to that point, it's been sort of a bit more straight, if that makes sense. So it's worth a look, I would say. There are some kind of quite horror images. There's quite a lot of violence in this film, and I feel it ends in a pretty good place. I actually quite like the ending here. So I'll give this movie a 6 out of 10. I'd say it's worth a watch. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? So leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.